Being a working professional is not for the faint of heart, even if you're doing what you love every single day, like I get to do, doing the podcast, the coaching, creating scientific content, writing articles, collaborating with some of my favorite brands. Believe me, that's a dream in a lot of ways, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of you, or you guys are taking the steps towards that kind of lifestyle and professional life. But let me tell you that it's extremely, extremely challenging, and it's not always fun. But it's the hard work that is typically the important work. But nevertheless, that stress does contribute to a number of deficiencies. One of the primary deficiencies being magnesium. Like I said, there's a lot of stress involved in the daily grind. And if you're not careful, that stress can start to take a toll on your body, not only draining you of that vital energy, but making you magnesium deficient. And this deficiency can lead to higher levels of anxiety, irritability, trouble sleeping, and low energy. It can even contribute to muscle cramps. That's why I recommend you supplement with magnesium daily. I did a whole podcast on this with Wade Lightheart, episode number 56. And you can experience a number of positive health benefits just from getting enough magnesium, including better sleep, more energy, healthy blood pressure, less irritability, stronger bones, reduced muscle cramping, even fewer migraines. But to experience these health benefits, you have to get the right kinds of magnesium. There's actually 7 unique forms, and you must get all of them if you want to experience its calming, stress relieving benefits. That's why I only, and I do mean only, recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. It's the only organic, full spectrum magnesium supplement that includes all 7 forms of magnesium in one bottle. For an exclusive offer for my listeners, you can go to www.magbreakthrough.com/Andres for easy access. I will include it in the show notes. All you have to do is click to make your order. In addition to the discount you get by using promo code Andres, that's ANDRES, you can unlock special gifts with purchase with retail values of at least $20. This is a limited time offer for select orders, so go to magbreakthrough.com/Andres right now, and I hope that you guys enjoy these amazing, amazing benefits. All right, Bryan, here we are on the Know Your Physio podcast. I have been enjoying and digesting your content now for the past few months. I've seen you grow exponentially, and I think it's for all the right reasons. You're teaching people a skill that is so often overlooked, but really lays the foundation for the rest of our lives and our performance and our longevity. And I've had several conversations now with people, experts in breathwork, but the way that you approach this, it goes deeper than the physical. It goes into the quantum, right, which actually ties into your branding and your brand name, and the emotion. First and foremost, welcome to the show. How would you describe? The first question for you: how would you describe the way you use breath to influence people's lives? Because I'm having trouble introducing you, because I know that it's more than just the physical and the anatomical and the physiological means of helping them live better lives.
Well, thank you, Andres, for having me on, and I appreciate that. And thank you to all the listeners who are about to engage in this. Well, for me, I've been a personal trainer for about 36 years now, and I've always been an athlete and a wrestler. I started wrestling at 14, but I've always embodied the feeling of health. And I've always lived that healthy lifestyle, except, as I told you before we started recording, there was a glitch in my matrix for a while. But for now, the way that I'm helping people is through breath retraining, which is I would have never have thought that I would be teaching breath. Never, because when I first learned about it, I thought it was dumb.
Yeah.
And that was about 12 to 15 years ago with Dr. Beliza here in New York City of Breathe. And then a little over 5 years ago, I met Dr. Lois at a barefoot training seminar. And they had introduced her and said she was going to come out and speak about breath. And I was like, oh, Jesus. I was like, man, I came to a movement seminar. Why are they teaching breath? And that's exactly how I felt. Like, don't talk to me about this. But yet, everything she said, I was like, oh my God, that's me. I have all of these issues. You mean the reason I have these issues is because I can't breathe? And then boom, I was hooked, line and sinker. Because I'm a very critical thinker. I'm very open. I don't put into dogma things I've learned. I have that natural ability that, okay, I've learned it. It might have served me for a short time or a long time, whatever it was. But if I find something that contradicts it and teaches me that what I was previously teaching might not have been correct, well, I don't get embarrassed. I start to talk about what I've found that's new and engaging and cutting edge. And that's how you learn and you grow and you develop wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it counts to be skeptical, to be open-minded to new discoveries and new truths, and that really just goes hand in hand with the scientific method, right? And a lot of what we're going to describe here on one level is science and applied science, but on a different level, it's an appreciation for things that maybe science can't yet describe, but that we need to be open-minded to if we want to achieve these incredible transformations, right? So yeah, let's jump right in and discuss some of the cutting edge and help people breathe better. We were just having a little conversation about how we, work together with some of these elite athletes, and you would think that at that level, they have it all figured out. The nutrition, the fitness, the sleep, the biohacking for travel and mindset, etc. And you would think that they can breathe properly. A lot of people, though, they get there because of some ridiculous innate ability, right? This elite ability to perform under pressure. Some of them get really lucky. I mean, it's a combination of the two, I would say. But yeah, I mean, in order to keep them at that level and help them go even further, they need to have all these things ticked off, right? And one of them is breath. Why is breath overlooked, not just in everyday people, but in athletes specifically? Like, why do you think it's so overlooked?
Because strength coaches and the coach of the teams were never taught it. And it's as simple as that. It's not even their fault. It's that no one ever brought it into their purview. There was never any studies on it. I've studied with all the top movement coaches in the world, and not one of them ever mentioned a thing about breathing. So I think that's why it's missed. And it should be the forerunner. It should be the most important thing. And then sleep is second, nutrition is third, and exercise is fourth. And I think most of them are doing it wrong. In my opinion now, I think they're breathing wrong, they're training wrong, and they're exercising wrong. So, and that I only feel that way because of the physiology of what breath is. So now I look at how I train other people, and I'm like, wow, I never should have been killing anybody, and I never should have been out of breath during my training.
Oof. Wow. Okay. Well, and just to quickly jump in here, I mean, I obviously, you're an expert in breath, and people tuning in may say, oh, but he's biased and he wants to, teach people how to breathe. It's what you do. You're an expert. But I love the way that you put this before sleep, because I've noticed that the best way to promote deeper sleep, more restorative sleep, and feel more refreshed in the mornings is by addressing the breath for sleep. Because I always describe breath, and I'm sure you would agree here, as the most accessible way to influence your physiology, the most immediate and accessible way to influence your physiology. And sleep really is a deep state of relaxation. It's supposed to be you have a lot of this parasympathetic activity, right? Where your body has the opportunity to repair, replenish, recover, remember, etc. But if you get the breathing wrong, you can't achieve the parasympathetic state necessary to derive the benefits of all the training that you're doing and all the things that you're experiencing. So it's like, you need to breathe right to sleep right. And then if you sleep right, like that's upstream of all these other habits. You have more energy to train in the morning and throughout the day. You make better decisions about what you're going to eat, right? So why don't you take us through, if we can start with sleep as being upstream of all these other habits, why don't you take us through what it takes through breath work to sleep better?
Okay. Number one, you have to have an open working nose. That's first and foremost. Okay. Number two, you have to make sure that your teeth aren't touching when you're sleeping, because anybody who grinds their teeth or presses their teeth has cranial nerves that are out of sequence, out of balance. So if there's compression on the brainstem, then you're not going to get the deepest sleep because the body can't relax and it can't heal. And sleeping isn't just a relaxation thing. It's not just a physical thing. There's a lot going on when we're sleeping. We change dimensions and realities. and our spirit goes off into other dimensions and it learns in other dimensions. So we're not really sleeping. We call it sleeping, but we're living while we sleep in other worlds. And we learn a lot from that. That's why dreams are very important, to write them down and to remember. And you can learn a lot from your dreams. So having said that, in my world, there's a feedback loop. It's a triangle. Breathing is at the top, of course. Then you have sleep. Then you have emotions. One more. You said sleep and breathing. We have emotions. If I get a good night's rest, then, if I'm breathing well, I'm going to sleep really well. And I know this because I was an insomniac for 25 years. And being an insomniac created, there was so many other factors, but it caused major adrenal fatigue, real weakness. That's real weakness. So not being able to sleep well, not being able to breathe well caused me not to sleep well. And it made my emotions all over the place. And I'm also a wrestler. So my pedigree is to be bent over in an offensive, defensive position. Even when you're at rest, you're chemically trained to be combative and defensive at the same time. So, and if you're training and you're over breathing, which 99.9% of the athletes are, because no one taught them that they shouldn't be heavily breathing. So if my breathing is off, I'm not going to get a good night's rest. It's that simple. If I don't get a good night's rest, I'm going to wake up feeling bad. It only takes one bad night of sleep. Everybody knows this. You have one bad night of sleep. You wake up and you're like, oh man, I got a really long day today. It just takes one night to feel bad. So in my world, you address breathing so you can sleep better. And then you'll notice that you feel good all the time because you're getting more relaxation and you're breathing better. And breathing usually works in about 2 weeks. Usually in about 2 weeks, if people follow the prescription, they start to feel better immediately.
Right, absolutely. And if we can dial back real quick, I want to address this idea, this notion that we're in a different world when we sleep, right? Like from my perspective, the way I see, for example, REM, right, rapid eye movement when we dream, the way I see it, it's memory consolidation. You're remembering details, you're remembering faces and names, and you're acquiring skills. In order to achieve those states, you really need to be in an environment that feels safe, that feels secure. And you enter this new world, this new realm where the subconscious is essentially, where in a way it manifests and it expresses itself, and it allows you to add meaning to some of the things that you're learning, and allows you to sort of paint the picture and remember the next day what that is and what it feels like and how you can be better, fatter. So it's like it is an opportunity to refine who you are, to refine your being. But I want to hear from you. How would you describe sleep and dreaming, and what importance, what weight do they hold from your perspective, in your world?
Well, I used to think when I was an insomniac that sleep wasn't that important because I would not sleep very well and then wake up and, gain my bearings and then push through the day. And I always felt like, well, I can push through the day. I'm fine. I'm an athlete. I'm tough. And then every night I would dread going to bed because I knew I wasn't going to get a good night's sleep. And then about 8 years ago, I met with a high-level acupuncturist here in New York City who was Eastern European. And the first session, within 10 minutes, this person said to me, guys like you have a heart attack in your 60s and die. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm looking at myself and I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, you're burning up. She's like, do you sleep well? And I was like, no. She's like, do you have trouble falling asleep? I go, well, I go to bed because I have to go to bed, not because I want to. And she's like, that's because you're adrenalized. You're burning up. So you feel like you don't need to sleep, but you're supposed to sleep. And I'd been sleeping for a long time. So once I started sleeping, and I really don't sleep very much still because I'm a fruitarian, and the less food you put in your body, the less sleep you need. Sleep is overrated if you're a clean vessel. If you're a clean vessel, you're not going to be sleeping 7-8 hours a night. You're going to be sleeping more like 4 to 6. You're going to sleep much less because you don't have to digest any food. So, so that's really my point right there.
So you got away with less sleep by
I
breathing
didn't get away with
properly
it.
and by okay. Everything was wrong about it, but with this new approach, in a way, you could still now you can afford essentially less hours to get what you need for the day because you've mastered the sleep through your nutrition, your breath.
Yeah, I
your
wouldn't even
lifestyle.
consider it to be that. It's like it's all my body needs. It's my baseline
Right.
now.
Okay. Well, so one thing that you were just describing was that you approach training when you do your training, you're not out of breath, right? So essentially, before you were in this constant sympathetic drive, you were constantly stressing your body, and so as a result, what you really need, but what's hard to get, in that case, is the sleep to recover. Now you're in a position where your training is so efficient, your lifestyle, your nutrition, everything is so efficient that you can tolerate that stress better. You're not creating as much stress, but you're deriving more benefits from the training with minimal input. And then you don't need to invest in the opportunity to recover the way that other people would. People who are breathing wrong, people who are in this constant sympathetic drive. So how do we make the shift to enable this lifestyle to appreciate it?
Well, that's a great question. It's going to take time because there's going to be a lot of people that want to bark at that. So, the only way to do it is to look at a guy like Israel Adesanya, who's the UFC middleweight champ, either middleweight or welterweight, and he can fight an entire MMA fight without ever opening his mouth. He doesn't get out of breath. He goes a whole title fight, he doesn't get out of breath. So why are we getting out of breath in training? So you're supposed to make 1% adaptations every day. That's hormesis. That's adaptability to stress. You're not supposed to stress your body to that effect. You're never supposed to open your mouth when you train. No cheetah runs after an antelope with its mouth open. No horse runs a race with its mouth open. No antelope tries to get away from the cheetah with its mouth open. So we should not be breathing above our metabolic requirements because that's creating lactic acid. And then your body can't remove the lactic acid because you're off-gassing carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is medicine. It's not a waste gas. Every tissue in your body makes carbon dioxide. It's a product of aerobic respiration. So if we come at it with this principle of never letting ourselves get out of breath during training, then yeah, you're not going to feel like you worked really hard, and that's okay.
And not just the physical training, the mental, the cognitive strain too. Like if you're sitting at a desk all day working, you should still be nasal breathing. Most people will immediately go into mouth breathing. They're using their upper, chest to breathe, and they just keep themselves in this constant, chronic, sympathetic overdrive. And they become exhausted, and now they have to try to get better sleep, but then they don't because they're stressed out and they're like, sleep, fuck sleep. So it's like, it's a big shift to make. What do you think is the most accessible first step to get
making sure that you breathe through your nose while you're sleeping? So if it means taping your mouth, because we have to fix sleeping. So we have to fix our breathing so we can sleep. And that's the main thing. And then you have to make sure that each nostril is actually independently working. So you have to practice same side nasal breathing because it helps to reorganize the 12 cranial nerves. Because you are the 12 cranial nerves. You're nothing else. You're just experiencing this 3D reality through energy, which is quantum energy, right? I'm not thinking what to say. It's just coming in me. It's not from my brain. It comes from there, the ether, right? I'm pulling information in. Of course, as I learn things, I'm able to recall them, but it's still coming from somewhere because I don't have to think, let me say this word. Let me say this word, right? So,
right.
And if I get a good night's rest, then when I wake up, my brain's going to be in alpha and theta. And then I do my breathing exercises. I stay in that brainwave state, which is a higher brainwave state. Brainwaves slow, but frequency and vibration increase reciprocally. And then I'm in that imagination state that Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about in the biology of belief. And then I go throughout my day and I don't have to be anxious and I don't have to feel depressed about what happened yesterday. I'm in a very calm state. So there's no flow state to get to. People are like, I was in flow. Well, if you were in flow and you got out of flow, why'd you get out of flow? You should be in a meditative flow all day long. We talk about athletes. Well, 2,000 years ago, nobody was exercising like we do now. And that's a problem. Yeah, there's a lot of athletes out there. We see amazing things that human beings could do. Does it mean it's good for you? I would say no. As I've been an athlete my whole life, but now I do less. And I don't even think I need to exercise. All I need to do is have a high bolt score. I don't think I need to exercise at all. I do it now. I think it's still a little bit of an ego. I mean, I'm much thinner than I used to be, but I have a image in my head that I want to look like, but I don't really think that that's necessary for my body. Well, I'm stuck in between that world still. And not eventually, because I can't say this, but I think my goal, if I had to say a life goal, I would like to be breatharian.
I'll tell you what, I think most people tuning in right now most of them are not familiar with any of this vocabulary, breatharian and bolt score. And I want to make sure that we address this and that we do it justice. Before we get there, just to be on the same playing field as you and to show the audience why I appreciate this and just to be on the same kind of page here. I spent 10 years taking amphetamines to focus in school. And I was, as a result, inevitably, I was an insomniac. Wow. I didn't sleep. And I never understood what it meant to have flow or this natural ability to find focus. It didn't exist to me. It wasn't a part of my life. It got to the point where I had to quit. Most people tuning in know the story already. But I had to quit. I did. And now when I get good sleep, I wake up in the morning and I feel so clear. Like the mental clarity that comes, I swear to you, I don't know where this energy comes from, but it just goes through my body. It goes on paper. It goes in my meetings. It goes with my clients. It goes into my work. And it's something that I think every human being needs to experience at least once. And if we can get our world in a position where everyone can do that, we're going to be living like in a dream world, because everyone's going to do what they're meant to do. Everyone's going to do what they do with that purpose and intention, with good mental health and physical health. So it's like now I do everything I can in my life. Everything that I do, I try to optimize for that flow or clarity, if you will, and try to maintain that throughout the day. And I find that breath and sleep and emotions, just like you're describing, it's not a coincidence, that it lines up. It is the physiology. It sets the stage for this kind of wellness and performance, right? And if you look at these elite athletes, they're people that can engage and can find that flow and focus, but a lot of them ignore the breath. Imagine how much better their lives would be and how much better their performance would be, how effortless it would be to arrive at that level of high performance consistently while also investing in other areas of their lives. A lot of these high performers, they end up neglecting these other areas because they have to do so much to get to that peak, right? And elite people aside, elite performers aside, I think everybody needs to understand and appreciate how important it is to breathe properly. So now let's go ahead and unpack some of this vocabulary, right? What's a bolt score? We've mentioned it on podcasts in the past, but take us through what a bolt score is, why it's so important to harness it and to increase it, and how people can apply this science.
Well, in 1904, there was a Danish scientist named Christian Bohr, whose son is very famous. He won the Nobel Prize for quantum physics in 1919. His name's Niels Bohr. So in 1904, the dad was 85 years old, and he originated, not invented, because remember, everything is already there. So he originated this law of cellular respiration, and it was called the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. And then they renamed it the Bohr law, the Bohr effect. So in the late 50s, there was a Russian scientist, Ukrainian heritage, I believe, and his name was Konstantin Buteyko, and he started to do all the research based off Christian Bohr's work. And then he said, wow, he was able to develop a very simple test to see what your carbon dioxide tolerance is. Now, why do we want to know what our carbon dioxide tolerance is? Carbon dioxide is bad for you. It's not good for you, right? Except every tissue in your body makes carbon dioxide. It's a product of aerobic respiration, and it is the basis of life. So he came up with this very simple test that he called the controlled pause, because it's not a breath hold test. It's pausing your breath. I'm just going to digress for a second. The ancient masters, and I mean thousands of years ago in India and China, way ago, they knew that when they were in meditation, their breath would stop. They weren't trying to do breath retention exercises. They were in such a peaceful state because their brain waves were so low that their breath would stop. And when it stops, that's where God is found. That's where the information enters your brain. That's where the gamma rays enter your brain. They rewire the software. You have the hardware. Everything's there for you to be the Buddha. Everyone has been the Buddha and Hitler and Genghis Khan. And once those brainwaves entered their state, well, they didn't need to breathe. And the reason they didn't need to breathe is because their tolerance to the gas carbon dioxide was so efficient that when they paused their breath, carbon dioxide would only go like this. But most people hold their breath and they're like, within 10 seconds, they got to let go, right? That's really bad. That's dysfunctional breathing. So this test for your tolerance to CO2 can literally tell you what your baseline homeostasis is. And it's rooted in science. So in the Oxygen Advantage, of which I'm a master instructor of, which has all its roots in the Buteyko method, because my mentor, Patrick McCown, was a 15-year Buteyko teacher. And he started the Oxygen Advantage because Buteyko was missing training athletes. And they didn't want to change. They didn't want to change any of the method. So he said, all right, I'm going to start my own company. And he did. And it was specifically for athletes, but it's also Buteyko really. So I can work with somebody who's got COPD to an elite athlete. And your threshold of carbon dioxide is going to, it's basically a subjective measurement of your level of breathlessness. And we don't talk about that at all. So when I work with an elite athlete or anybody, a mom of 3 children, I want to see what their tolerance to carbon dioxide is, because it's going to tell me what their level of fight or flight is. It's going to tell me how breathless they get. As soon as something arises and they get triggered, it's because they're breathless to begin with. So as soon as stress arises, the body activates the SNS, the sympathetic nervous system, so it has to pull more air in. And when it pulls more air in, you become hypertensive. That's fight or flight. But if you're already in a hypertensive state, when stress arises, you're going to be overactive, and then you can't control your emotions. So this very simple test can tell you what your baseline is. And baseline is a minute. And in the 6 years I've been training people, I've only met one good breather. And she wasn't even at baseline. One good breather. I've met people that think they're in really great health. And then you show them what their breathing is, and they're like, wow. And they're like, oh, this is why this happens. This is why this happens. That's happened to me too. I'm like, listening to Dr. Lois at the summit, I'm like, oh my God, wow. So this information needs to be shared far and wide, and it's not. And it's out there in studies, but they don't see it on the news. Your general practitioner is not going to talk about it. And Professor Buteyko said that there are over 200 named diseases that are all breathing-related issues. So basically, you can heal everything by focusing on learning to command your breathing and building your CO2 tolerance. Your body will heal itself. It just needs the signal. You're not even supposed to die. And Babaji, the Indian deity, who's been alive for like over 2,000 years, who people see all the time in India, and maybe not all the time, has been around for eons. Just like Don Juan in the book A Separate Reality by Carlos Castaneda, he was able to transcend dimensions. He could just walk into different dimensions, but he didn't eat, he didn't drink, and he'd been alive for nobody even knew. But you tell that to somebody, the listeners are going to go, are you kidding me? That's just because you were never taught it. If you're taught you can't fly, you can't fly.
Wow.
I mean, if monks can levitate, which they have been known to do, then that's it. That's proof.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of the community that's tuning in right now, they're more on the scientific end. They're going to scoff at this, right? But what I want to suggest here is that everyone reads the Oxygen Advantage, tunes to this podcast and learn better breathing techniques, and just give their body the chance to do what it has the intelligence to do. You know, if you can breathe better, you can sleep better, manage your emotions better, your body can do a really good job at taking care of
Yeah.
itself. It's unbelievable. I think if you go off on one extreme, then there's the breatharian and just eating fruit. Like, can you take us through what that extreme kind of looks like, but then kind of maybe shift us back to what most people understand is what's readily available to them? Like, I want to kind of show people what that end of the spectrum looks like, and then maybe help them take the steps towards what's readily available so that they can start to improve and feel better about their breathing and about their health and wellness. So what is fruitarian? What is breatharian? What does it even mean?
Breatharian means that you don't eat or drink. And again, there's plenty of people in India who don't eat or drink. And those people were studied 100 years ago, but as soon as J.P. Rockefeller bought the American Medical Association, he shut down all the colleges devoted to naturopathy medicine. So it's a business, right? They're not in the business of getting anybody healthy ever. So breatharianism is living off the pranic energy, right? Assimilating minerals from the air. And the air that we think is feeding our circulation. But there's an energy to that air, that pranic energy, and that feeds your nervous system. And that gives you all the nutrition you need, because you don't put food in your body and actually assimilate it into human tissue. They say you are what you eat. No, you are what you breathe. You are not what you eat. In fact, all of the organs related to digestion are redundant organs. They're not major organs. Now, we were breatharian, God knows how long ago. I don't know. Could be 1 million years ago already. And then we devolved over time. Like, we're in the Kali Yuga cycle, the Vedics. We're actually getting ready to have 1,000 years of peace. But after that 1,000 years of peace, we're going to digress again, because the Earth is going to fall out of the supermassive black hole in the center of the galaxy. It's going to fall out of its trajectory, its quasar, and then the consciousness is going to lower again, and we're going to get even worse than we were. But we got 1,000 years ahead of us. I just don't think that it's going to happen in our lifetime, because what I see now is that when I do consultation calls, it's people your age. It's people, I'm not sure, you said you were on the journey for 10 years, so you're probably 30, but you look 22.
I'm 26, just turned 26 a couple of days ago.
Wonderful for you, Andres, that you actually care about things like this and you want to bring this to your listeners, because every time I do a consultation with somebody in their 20s, I applaud them. I'm like, do you know, if you control your breathing now and you become the best breather you could be, when you have children, those children are born enlightened. You're not going to pass on your subconscious self-limiting beliefs to your children, because as your Bolt score increases, you're flooding your prefrontal cortex with oxygen, and your lower chakras are no longer living out of your food, your sex, your drugs, your rock and roll, and all that. They become better parents. And now these children are going to grow up, and those are the children that are going to experience 5D Earth. Probably not for me, because I'm almost 54. I think maybe I have a chance to see some really prolific changes, but I'm not sure. It's probably going to be in my next life.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I have heard of these things in isolation before, but the way that you bring everything together and help us gain this perspective as to what they mean and how we can, just about anyone can appreciate the lessons here. I mean, that's really unbelievable. I think that we can do individual podcasts on every one of these little topics, right? And speak about them endlessly, but to get back to the listeners of this show and guide them in the right direction, what can they do right now about their nutrition, let's say, that works synergistically with their breathing? Like before anyone becomes a breatharian here, what can they know? But I love it. But what's the most accessible for people right now tuning in that want to develop a lifestyle that orients them towards higher and better health and well-being? I know, for example, you're a big fan of marine phytoplankton. I absolutely love chlorella and spirulina. She makes a super high-quality chlorella spirulina supplement. I recently developed a menu for a Mediterranean restaurant. It's superfood protein shakes menu. They have the chlorella spirulina. When I spent the 2 weeks making these shakes and developing the recipes for them, it's all I was eating throughout the day because I had to master the shakes, right? And this is just a silly little example, but I don't think I've ever felt more clear and energized in my life, honestly. And now I make it a thing to get chlorella and spirulina in my day, every day. So why don't you tell us a little more about marine phytoplankton, how you use it, and the benefits that you see?
I just want to say too, back up just a second, that please don't go breatharian out there. There has got to be a transition phase that you have to go through. And my transition took years. I gave up flesh 11 years ago. And then I became vegetarian. And then I found out how vegetarianism is not good for you. And then I gave up vegetables. But when I got into my fruitarian journey, is because I had already been on the breathing journey for a year and 3 months. And once I started to regulate my breath, I started to rebalance my blood pH. And as my pH became more neutral, I started to bring in higher vibrational lifestyle choices into my reality. And then I found Dr. Sebi. Then I found Dr. Morse. And after watching hundreds of Dr. Morse videos, I said, I'm going to go fruitarian and I'm going to heal my body because everything was wrong with me. My kidneys I was being told that I would have a heart attack in my 60s and die. So I had to transition safely. Now, I had already been on the marine phytoplankton even before my breathing journey. And I actually think that it was the consciousness of this living organism that brought me to this state. And the phytoplankton that I take, the reason it's different than chlorella and spirulina is because phytoplankton is the first living organism created by light, sound, vibration, and of course, God. So chlorella and spirulina had to come after. And it also comes from a river, and you don't come from the river. Your blood plasma is nothing like river water, but your blood plasma, human blood plasma, is almost identical to the ocean plasma. So when you eat phytoplankton, it has every amino acid. So now here I am. I don't put flesh in my body. I don't take any protein, nothing. I don't believe that. I have an acupuncturist that I see, and I wouldn't even be caught dead in a doctor's office. I would never have a colonoscopy. I will never do any of the tests that medical science tells me to do. I regularly see a chiropractor and a Qigong master acupuncturist. So every week I go to the doctor, and every week I'm supported, and every week I get grounded. And then I'm constantly working on relieving the stress from my subconscious that takes the energy suck out of my chi, that allows my spine to be more flexible, more resilient, which means my tone is more balanced. And if my fascia is more balanced, my organs are sitting in the right place and my energy is flowing. So now we got to get back into that. So the phytoplankton is the precursor of health. I recently, on the vernal equinox, I did a 5-day water fast, but I didn't really think about it as a water fast. I called it a solid food vacation, but I ate marine phytoplankton because I think that even fasting is stressful on a human's body. Now, if you're really good at fasting and you've done it for a long time, fine. But most people, they start fasting and they start feeling sick. You're feeling sick because as you stop putting food in your body, it's like heroin. You feel sick because you're vitally adjusted to eating these foods and the chemicals and everything else that's in the food. And then you start to feel sick because your body starts releasing the toxicity out of the cells. And then you feel sick and people will keep going. Well, no, you should stop immediately. As soon as you don't feel good, some people would say, no, you have to push through it. No, you stop immediately and you transition the next time into doing maybe 6 hours longer, 12 hours longer, and you very much incrementally move up. My transition has taken me 11 years. I'm not done because I'm still eating food. I'm emotionally addicted to food. I had watermelon right before you. And the reason I talked about the break I needed is so I can have a mango before my next student, but I'm already planning my next meal, which means I'm not eating for sustenance. I'm eating because I want to eat. I can go all day without eating and not care about it, but as soon as I eat, I need to eat again. And that's an emotional addiction. That's not because my body needs food. It's because as soon as I give it that drug, it wants more of the drug. But people don't think food is a drug, and it most certainly is.
No, you produce all sorts of endorphins, especially with the processed foods. The processed foods are designed to give you the impression of nutrient density and and nurturing, right? You isolate the crunchiness, which is like a fresh fruit, right? Like you get that crunchy sensation. You're like, oh, this is fresh. It's like basically, as processed food is just you're exploiting all these reward mechanisms that good food would otherwise give you, and you're doing that completely void of nutrients, right? Like they add in these colors to make it seem as if it's nutrient dense. It's like it's just tricking you. Like it's just exploiting reward mechanisms. Like how are people so? I don't even want to talk badly about people on this. I want to empower them, but it's like it's just so obvious that this stuff is not good for you. And when people remove that and they fast, they get stressed out because their body is under the impression that this is actually giving them the nutrients. So like no, and definitely with you on incrementally tapering any lifestyle change, right? But especially fasting, it can be such a stressor to the human body, especially in people that are already enduring stress, chronic stress that they don't even know about. So it should always be a transition.
So I did a 5-day solid food vacation on phytoplankton. And when I got to the 5th day, I didn't have any hunger pains at all. I felt great. And then I planned it. I went to acupuncture the next day and he was like, wow, because I went to him on day 2 and then on day 6. And he said, wow, this is the best you've ever felt. All 12 of your meridians are open. And this is the best your organs have ever felt. And that was on no food. But I was feeding my brain the phytoplankton. So it was getting every amino acid, every essential fat, and every single vitamin plus chlorophyll, and almost every mineral. Now, what the company that I take the phytoplankton from, it's called ascendedhealth.com. Now, I'm not going to get any kickbacks, so everybody should go there and start buying their products. I offer everybody to do it. The owner has intimately studied King Solomon's writings, and King Solomon was granted wisdom by God until he went down the bad path. But before that, he was living a high vibrational lifestyle, and he wrote a lot of stuff down. And the owner has studied these writings, so he knows how to take chlorella and spirulina and light them on fire, break them down into their constituent parts, and then infuse it back into the marine phytoplankton. So you're getting the phytoplankton and chlorella and spirulina, but it's going to be bioavailable and it's going to work synergistically, because when you feed the hypothalamus gland all of these right signals, I don't want to call it macronutrients, I don't want to call it that, right signals, then the body knows what to do. And then the body comes online.
Wow. Well, I mean, everything you're saying is just so much we can unpack. I'm trying to respect the listeners and their time and your time and my time. But I am just blown away by this combination, this synergistic blend. I mean, I've already seen tremendous benefits to chlorella and spirulina. I'm curious what would happen if I add in the marine phytoplankton and have them work synergistically. So again, for those tuning in, we'll link to this in the show notes. But what's the name of that company?
AscendedHealth.com.
Ascendedhealth.com. And so is this like a pill or a powder?
It's a powder. It's free. They source their phytoplankton from really ethical farms, and then he grows them in the lab in ketone seawater. Phytoplankton has almost all the minerals, not all of them. That's the only thing that it's not the complete. So I take seawater by this company called Quinton, Q-U-I-T-O-N, and they, I forgot exactly where it is, but where they get their seawater is also a very pristine ocean. It might be in the North Atlantic. And then, of course, they process it and clean it. So, again, your plasma is the same as seawater. So when you ingest the seawater, then you're getting bioavailable minerals. I know a lot of people will like, well, I take this mineral concoction. It's like 3-4 minerals. The body doesn't work like that. You can't take vitamin E and think it assimilates perfectly into your body. The body never works like that. It doesn't work in parts. It doesn't say, oh, okay, give me this vitamin B and I'm going to be able to assimilate it. No, actually, it's going to put stress on your liver and your kidneys, because your body has to then break it down because it's not bioavailable. So seawater is seawater. So he grows his phytoplankton in the seawater. So I take the phytoplankton and I take the seawater. And that's really all I take.
Nowadays, isn't that seawater polluted with like plastic and
process of cleaning it? They've been around, I think, since 1897.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. Yeah, it's incredible. So I'm looking for things that are completely and totally not going to create any energy suck in my body. That's not going to cause my body to have to use any energy to break it down. That's what bioavailable means. Like if you eat fruit, your body has to. So fruit is the least amount of, it doesn't require any insulin. Every other food requires insulin, which means your body has to break it down. So you think you're getting nutrition, but yet your body has to break it down to get the nutrition. That's not nutrition. So I try to put stuff in my body that's going to create no residue, which means no agglomeration, which means I'm not going to be impacted in my intestines, in my colon. And I've been on the phytoplankton for 7 years, and it takes 7 years to remap your whole entire cellular body. And I'm about to be 54. I mean, I probably look 40, but that's okay. I can deal with that.
Less than 40.
Yeah, I don't want to look 40, but again, that's my ego right now.
Yeah, right. Well, so what's fascinating is, so just to get this right, you're only consuming the marine phytoplankton, you're getting seawater and then fruit.
Yep. Well,
that's it.
When I'm bored of fruit, then I eat spinach salad. I eat leafy greens. I'll eat a leafy green that grows above ground, which gets the biophotons from the sun. You know, and it's a little bit more agglomeration and residue than a fruit, but it's not as taxing. So when I'm bored, I eat salad.
Correct.
And if I go out to dinner, I eat a salad. I don't eat anything else.
Right.
Sometimes the waiters or waitresses, they're like, is that it? I'm like, why, do you want me to have 2 salads?
Well, so a couple of things that I think you'll appreciate is I just spent a week living with Ben Greenfield. We were like free diving and spearfishing in North Carolina. And, you know, this guy, it was a lot of fun. It was tremendous fun. And, you know, every morning we woke up and we did a ridiculously intense workout. And then we'd go diving and spearfishing. And what blew me away was how little this guy ate. You know, he's not a breatharian, he's not a fruitarian, but like, and he didn't seem, it's like he even needed to eat. Like, he just wasn't really consuming much. And he's like you, he's like 3% body fat, literally 3% body fat. He's super productive. He's super present. He recovers like, you know, perfect. Like it's just unbelievable to see someone at that level performing physically at that level and eating like such few calories. Like I think most people would be under the impression that he's eating like at least 4,000 or 5,000 calories, but he's not even close. And that blew me away. I'm like, wow, his body is really efficient at using everything he gets from his food. He doesn't need more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, there's no such thing as body fat. There's such a thing as fat cells. And the reason that they get bigger is because the body has to put the toxins somewhere else to get them away from the organs. So then a fat cell grows, but it doesn't get more fat. It's putting toxicity into the fat cell, and so does the muscle cell. So when people are really big, I used to be 165. I squatted 622 pounds drug-free. Now I'm 142, which is my college wrestling weight, but I used to suck down from 165. So,
How tall are you?
5'5", 5'6", something like that. I think when I was young, I was 5'6". Then I'm now 5'5" because my spine compressed, but now I'm starting to get taller again.
You know, I think most people are, they really appreciate and admire you because of so much of what you're sharing and the way that you're sharing it. But also, let's be honest here. I mean, you look incredible, right? And I think people have seen folks like, you know, the Liver King, for example, right? This dude who's eating the complete opposite of what you're eating, like just meat and organs. But then, oh my God, he's obviously on steroids, right? So like when I look at someone like you, you're obviously, you know, totally natural, right? But do you think that this is something that realistically other people can achieve?
I don't, when I work with, because students, I mean breathing students, I don't require people to be on a raw food lifestyle, but they know me. And then people want to start to try it. And then I help guide them through it. And then most of the people that do that, they start to breathe better. Because when you stop putting agglomerating foods in your body, then let's say you eat meat. Now, I think meat is better than vegetables. If like, I don't follow Paul Saladino because I don't really follow anybody in terms of health. I listen to myself. I learn things, I discern information, but I don't put anybody as a god. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. And people shouldn't listen to anything I say. They should just discern information. I'm not right. I'm just giving an experience of my life. That's it. I don't pretend. That's why on Instagram, I don't fight with anybody. When people say mean things,
Yeah.
I say nice things back, and then it stops like that. I don't get another response. So I know how to influence a situation because I'm breathing well. So for me, it's just about living the example. And if it resonates with another person, then it resonates. So as they start to become raw, their bolt score starts to go up. Their breath hold times start to go up. Because when you're putting foods in your body that are not digestible, and that you're putting proteins in your body that are not digestible, a protein is acid. You don't put acids in your body to be healthy. So when you do that, where's all the oxygen got to go? It's got to go to the digestive process. It's got to go to fight the inflammation. So that makes it much harder to become a good breather. And then as soon as somebody tries it for like 3 days, they go, whoa. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, there's something to this. And they start to slowly transition. And I have a beautiful little webinar on my Instagram channel that's $22. It's 90 minutes, and it's called Transitioning to a Mucus-Free Lifestyle, My 6 Steps.
And another really powerful lesson that I've learned from you is these, it's like a hypercapnic breath hold sprints. I did those the other day. I did 5 of them. They kicked my ass.
That's because you shouldn't have done them. Yeah,
really?
I'm showing the sprints, but I always say, don't do this.
Oh my God. Well, you know how Instagram works. Someone sees someone like you and they want to do it themselves because they think they'll get the same result, right? But something I'll add here is I actually do, like I said, I went spearfishing and freediving with Ben. I've been doing that for years, and I've seen tremendous health benefits from all this breath hold training that I've had to learn as a result. You know, super high bolt score, beyond 5-minute breath hold, diving 90 feet, 100 feet.
Wait, on an inhale or an exhale?
No, that's with an inhale in a pool. It's totally different.
Exactly what we don't want to do.
Yeah, well, when you're freediving and spearfishing,
but that every freediver suffers from some form of hypertension, so it's very much stressful on your body, and really should only be done when you're, doing a certain thing. But if I were teaching divers, I would be teaching them hypercapnic holds to improve their hypocapnic underwater holds.
I mean, so why shouldn't I do the sprints?
Well, you can, and you're young, but so it's like fasting. When I fast, all the toxins are going to be released. When I do a hypercapnic sprint without ever trying to hold my breath sitting still, well, I'm going to release a lot of toxins because I'm driving the carbon dioxide levels up, which is high levels of lactic acid that your body might not be able to deal with.
Lactic acid and hydrogen ions, right?
Hydrogen ions are very good for you because they make the cell walls permeable. So toxicity can get out and nutrients can get in, specifically oxygen and structured water, H3O, right? So when you do a hypercapnic sprint like that and you drive your carbon dioxide levels up, you're also driving your blood pH is dropping. And yes, that's a good thing because the body learns to buffer that acidic state through the flooding of hydrogen ions, which takes carbon dioxide and disassociates it into carbonic acid, which is medicine. And then through a complex set of chemical reactions, that carbonic acid mixes with water to form pyruvate, which gets into the mitochondria.
Right. So then lactate becomes a favorable substrate.
But it turns into bicarbonate. So you actually learn to buffer your own acid, which is why you don't want to get out of breath when you're training.
Right. So your body isn't under the necessary stress to learn to do that, and therefore making you more efficient. You're bypassing process for efficiency.
And that's Professor Buteyko. And then Oxygen Advantage. But Ben did a podcast with Patrick a few years ago.
I had him on the podcast
Patrick
too.
On? Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, I had Patrick and I had David Jackson. Yeah. Those guys are awesome. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, when I first started doing this podcast a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, I was not into breathwork the way that I am now. And I keep bringing these experts on to talk about breath because it's like, oh my God, it's like that one thing that everyone overlooks, but sets the foundation for like everything else. So I'm fascinated by it. It's actually one of the reasons why, I felt inspired to doing a master's in neuroscience now. And I swear to you, like, what fascinates me the most about all of this is
you need to read
Buddha's Brain. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and pick it up. I mean, I'm just fascinated by it. Obviously, people like Huberman inspired me, but I'll tell you what, just the way that our nervous system, the role that it plays in every decision that we make, like, everybody wants to look like you and perform like you, right? But if they don't get their nervous system in the right state, they can't incorporate all these things. They can't tolerate the stress, that positive lifestyle change would otherwise have. So it's like, if you can regulate the nervous system, you can enable these habits that are objectively good for you and live a life that gives you more life. So that's one of the main reasons why I decided to dive in there and learn more. I mean, look, I'm a fan of learning by experimentation, just like you, and just kind of doing what feels good. But I'm also in the camp that it should be a combination of that, and then looking at the systematic reviews and the science, and just finding an appreciation for both and helping them exist, simultaneously and synergistically.
And that's really important. We do need the science, but there's also a lot of consensus science that might not necessarily be right, but yet it looks like it's right.
Well, now that I have the life experience and appreciation that folks like yourself and some other mentors and folks that I've had on the show, that now that I can appreciate that kind of learning, I think it gives me a kind of a more complete scope by which I can interpret and apply this information. So I like to study everything from every perspective and just kind of come to my own conclusions as a result. So I mean, this has been a very eye-opening conversation, to say the least. I'm sure a lot of people tuning in will say the same. And I look forward to a world, a dynamic where people can breathe better and achieve what they want to achieve out of their health, wellness, life, and performance through some of these methods.
Beautiful.
Yeah. We have a few more minutes here, if that's all right with you. I want to get into some of your approaches for fitness training, just a little more specifically. If someone wants to develop the strength, power without being out of breath, how can they do it?
Strength and power come from the nervous system. So the nervous system has to be balanced to begin with, which means the 12 cranial nerves have to be in sequence. And then if the 12 cranial nerves are in sequence, we're going to be breathing lower, slower, and deeper. But I train people, and even my breathing students. I have a Muay Thai fighter in Ontario who's fought over 100 fights. And he's been breathing with me for a little over 6 months now. And he says to me, my pad guy tries to murder me and he can't get me out of breath. That's the point. So you don't have to train to be out of breath. You just have to train to never get out of breath. And now he's trained to not get out of breath, which is what Israel Adesanya does in the UFC. So you have to be able to do what you want to do. But if you're on a program that calls for a certain level of difficulty, but you can't breathe, well, you got to alter your program. You don't go through with your program because you're only going to create a level of toxicity and stress in the body that you might get better still from it, but it doesn't mean ultimately it's good for you. And that's why athletes don't live long lives. That's a fact.
Right. And how does this kind of correlate with something like VO2 max? Right, because if you look at VO2 max, it has all these different components, right? It has the cardiac output, so that's your heart rate times your stroke volume, but then you also have the AVO2 difference, so the amount of oxygen that you absorb, so the difference in venous versus atrial oxygen, right? So like when you look at VO2 max, and you look at VO2 max as I think it's the most highly correlated biomarker with longevity. How can we train in this fashion to elicit these increases in VO2 max without the negative detriment of overtraining?
Right. So it's a biomarker that doesn't talk about the lungs. Now, if I'm over breathing, I'm stretching my lungs and I'm off gassing, which means I'm not going to have a greater ventilation perfusion. So when we learn to breathe through the nose, horizontally, not up, as soon as you enter into the back of your throat, there's a little imaginary button like shooting the water gun in a carnival into the clown's mouth. soon as you inhale into the back of your throat, you simultaneously feel it in your perineum, which is by your anus, and that creates a down breath. That's a deep breath. A deep breath is not this. You do not want to fill your lungs with air. You do not want to stretch your lungs. Your lungs are just like your heart. You're not supposed to overbeat your heart, and you're not supposed to overstretch your lungs. But everybody thinks the more air I breathe in, the greater So if I go running, obviously my lungs are going to expand a little bit more because I need to pull in more oxygen. But if I'm overbreathing, I'm removing the gas carbon dioxide. I'm not going to be breathing slowly. Slow breathing produces paranasal nitric oxide. And it's the nitric oxide that mixes with the oxygen inside the sinuses around the turbinates. They're like Rocky Mountains, and they discombobulate the air molecules because they excite them. And the more excited they are in the nostrils, then the nitric oxide is antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, and antimicrobial. And then that nitric oxide brings more oxygen into the lungs. Now, this is how you increase your max VO2 and your lung capacity. Your lungs are shaped like a triangle. The greatest concentration of alveoli are down here, but the highest concentration are up here because it's a smaller tube. So how do I get air to all the alveoli? And we think, oh, we just breathe in more air. No, that's opposite. It's opposite to everything we've been taught. When we slow down the speed of air, we produce more nitric oxide, and nitric oxide actually flushes the entire lung with blood. Now it's the blood that gets to the entire surface of the lung that increases gas exchange. That's ventilation perfusion, which means now I'm going to have a greater max VO2 because now I have more alveoli working, and that's it.
Right. And that's working that AVO2 difference. If you have better perfusion, then you can better use the oxygen that you're
So I want to train hypercapnic training to increase my aerobic threshold, because as my anaerobic threshold goes up, it brings my aerobic threshold with it. So let's say I go out and I run today and I do an 8-minute mile. Well, tomorrow I want to do a mile again. I don't want to go further. I want to do the mile at 7.9. Then the next day, hopefully not every day, but you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to make an example. Then the next day, I do 7.8, but I'm still able to breathe a specific cadence that I could do at 8.0. But now I didn't, I only went a little bit harder, and I kept my breathing in control to my metabolic requirement. And then the next day, 7.6, but I keep my breathing rate calm. And then the next day, you're like, wait a minute. A week ago, I was running at 8, and I was having trouble breathing at 3 in, 5 out. But 2 weeks later, I'm at 7.5, and I'm able to breathe 3 in and 5 out because of the hormesis effect, because of the increased alveoli, because of the increased perfusion. And that's what I'm training athletes to do. And it's a complete and total. I think especially we're killing children. All of these athletes now are better because we're pushing the children and we're not teaching them how to breathe. And that's a recipe for disaster. That's why most athletes don't make it to the top. It's not performance. It's the fact that they can't breathe, and then they have anxiety. And then when they get to the game, they start to freak out because they've been living in a state of fight or flight. Now here comes the big day, and that's going to create more sympathetic arousal, and they're already not breathing well, so they're off-gassing more. They're not getting oxygen to their brain, and they can't perform.
Yeah, and I mean, it's unbelievable. Like we spoke about this earlier, and so many people at the top, they're not even breathing properly. Imagine how much better they would perform, how much better they would live and tolerate stress if they were. I was recently watching the French Open, the tennis tournament, because one of my clients is playing there. She's a former U.S. Open champion, and even like I had to completely, help her accomplish changes with their breath. But then you see the other athletes that are competing. You see them. I mean, tennis is a very individual sport, which allows you to really hone in on the athlete, and you see the influence that their mindset has in the game. But then you see how you see the camera takes you, when they're sitting in between sets and resting and recovering. Like, it's unbelievable how almost all the players, you can watch the replays, right, of the tournament. Like, almost every single player, they sit down and they start taking deep breaths. And it's just like, And it's like, what are you doing? They look at their coaches and they're like, remember, and they touch their nose just to make the point that they're nasal breathing. And they're like, it's like you have this opportunity to rest and recover between sets, and you're overdoing it. You're putting yourself in a more stressed state. It's like,
Yeah.
how are we still doing this at the French Open? You know, like if people at that level are breathing incorrectly, you're absolutely right. Children who are being rewarded by their sports performance, it's a way to make them feel good about themselves. You know, teamwork and winning and learning about discipline and consistency and training. It's like you don't get the breathing right. Now all of a sudden the training is creating much more stress in their lives.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you just said about the winning and all that. What's worse is that the kid that's lagging behind gets made fun of, or the coach yells at him, or the coach doesn't put him on the field because that kid can't breathe. And the horse at the back of the race isn't the weakest horse. It's the horse that can't breathe as well. So when we see a kid falling off and we push them harder and we tell them, you know, all the kids start making fun of them, you're not good, or you're not pushing yourself, you don't have the will to train, we're damaging them. And really what it was is they couldn't breathe. I train, well, he's 14 now, but I have a former ice hockey player who was the New Jersey Devils captain, and I work with him and his son, and his son's become a dominant player on the ice, and he was a good player. Now he's a dominant player because he can create space immediately because he learned how to breathe. And when he gets on the bench, he knows how to recover.
Yeah, and it goes a long way. It's an opportunity that everyone else sitting on the bench doesn't have, unfortunately, but it's just the truth. All of a sudden you breathe better. You're going to be playing exponentially at a higher level, and you can tolerate that, and you can keep that going consecutively day after day, and you have no issue with it.
We're damaging their psyche thinking that you need to work harder than your opponent. No, I don't. Yeah. And I'm a wrestler. So I worked out 3 times a day for years, and I don't need to do that. All I need to do is work to my metabolic requirements and get that hormesis, and then I can get better every day. So we're damaging their psyche at a very young age, and then they feel like they're not good enough. And that creates a lot of, corrupted breathing mechanics because they start to get shamed. So that makes them guard themselves, and then they start to brace themselves, and now they're corrupted their breath.
Well, hey, I know that we only have these couple minutes left, and everything has been, this has been absolutely wonderful to connect with you. Is there any closing thoughts for the audience? Like maybe if you could put a sentence or a phrase on a billboard somewhere, people are driving by, walking by, and reading this message, what would it say and where would you put it?
Nothing has escaped the attention of modern man to the degree that breathing has.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And we need to really focus on that. And for every aspect of our life, everything you do requires you to be breathing well. If you want to do well, if you want to live your best life, you have to be breathing well. And some people could be living great lives and still not breathing well, but they're leaving stuff on the table. I work with a 6-time world champ who's a terrible breather. He's still world champ. I feel, he's getting older, and at some point he won't be that way anymore, and it'll be because of his physiology, not because of his talent.
Wow.
And the only reason he doesn't breathe well is because he listens to his coaches more than me. And I don't know this, I can perceive it.
Well, his coaches and what his coaches represent, right?
Yeah. I don't want to say I don't want to put myself on a pedestal, but as an Oxygen Advantage instructor, I really do feel like we are the gold standard because we're not only making people better, we're protecting them. I feel like I'm a caregiver. And if I show you how to breathe well, it's going to change everything in your life. It's life transforming. And that's why I created this 6-month Recode Your Breath program. And I've taken everything from the neurological side of breathing into the physiological side of breathing. And, I work with athletes like you, and I charge a lot of money, but everything I teach that athlete is in my program, and it's very affordable for people. It's something that's come out of me, and I'm actually very proud of it because I really believe it's going to transform millions of lives.
There you have it, folks. There's Bryan for you. Thank you so much, man. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you here with us.
The same way.
Thank you.
You're one of the best podcasters I've interviewed with. You just, you're very connected and you ask such amazing questions. And thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I will admit, however, I'm slightly over caffeinated today. So if I was a little over, yeah, oh my God, my travel schedule has been hectic. I haven't been getting the sleep that I should be getting. It reduces the perception of fatigue. Trust me, I've learned all this since I had Dr. Nathan Bryan on the show to talk about nitric oxide. I learned about this with Patrick McKeown. But I'll tell you one thing I love about caffeine is the taste.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah, I used to have coffee every single day, like 3 times a day. And I was like I said, I was taking amphetamines too. And now I have coffee maybe twice a week, maybe tops.
Yeah. Well, all you have to do is hold your breath for that rush that you need. Not the caffeine.
Yeah.
You'll get that same exact effect, and it'll be more bridled, more controllable just by holding your breath. Just exhale and hold your breath.
Yeah. You know what? I do that before bed too, to whenever I want to clear out my sinuses, I just kind of do a little bit of a breath hold. I hold on the exhale. I mean, I think that alone is something that everyone should know how to do. Can you take us through? I know that we're out of time, but if you can take us through that little routine to get people to breathe easier. I mean, right now while they're tuning in,
you take a normal breath in and a normal breath out. You pinch and hold. When you breathe out, you don't push air out. It's a normal breath. So when you pinch, you still have air left in the lungs. That's the carbon dioxide that's signaling the hemoglobin to disassociate. And then you bob your head because movement creates more CO2 buildup, more nitric oxide buildup, and you hold till a medium reaction to breathe. When you let go, you breathe in as slowly as you can. So you take the nitric oxide into your body, you vasodilate, you bronchodilate, you get pulmonary blood flow, and you do it like 5 or 6 times, and then you'll have an open airway before bed.
It's instant relief. It's one of the most useful applied science routines that I've ever taken on. You do it every single day. Wow. I love it. Awesome. Well, Bryan, I don't want to take any more of your time. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much, not just for your knowledge and information, but for embodying it and for sharing it with us. I really appreciate you for it, and I look forward to more of your incredible content and sharing this conversation with the world.
Thank you so much, Andres. It was a pleasure being with you today.